When we first were selling the collection of Nikki Kavitka about 10 years ago, there was one thing that she did not sell. She said, I need to hold on to them because they are what I started with, and they're the most precious things in the world to me. And she held on to them the rest of her entire life. And now they are here. And I will tell you, I have had other examples of these to sell from Schoenhut in the past, but I have never had this condition or this quality. And that is the Humpty Dumpty Circus. Some absolutely extraordinary pieces, starting with the circus tent itself, which is wonderful, and including, and they're being sold as separate lots, but she also had 2 of the side panels that go with them. And it was interesting when I was cataloging them, I never paid attention to it, and I have this time, and every one of those is different. And I don't think you could get away with it today. It would be pretty... It would not be politically correct for some of the people that they were showing at their sideshow, but there it is. They were there. That's history, and it's important to have that history bank in our knowledge so we can move forward on things. What I was also quite thrilled about when I was looking at this, I was studying the audience and seeing how many faces were presented in the lithographed background of the circus, showing the children and the parents and the excitement at the auction, and not just a group of people sitting there. Well, you know what it looks like? It looks like people at a doll auction, all happy and excited, and look at that one, and wow, what's coming next? And it's a wonderful, wonderful background. Now, along with the circus tent and the side panels, however, they are one of the rarest pieces in the entire Humpty Dumpty set produced by Schoenhut, and that is the Bandwagon. Things that people don't pay attention to, I think, with the Bandwagon is they don't pay attention to how many different faces are represented. This is not just the same doll that he plunked in there over and over again, but there are 3 or 4 different hairstyles, there are different facial expressions, different instruments, and all of the instruments are original, including the labeled band, drum band. And something I never noticed until this time, those that have the mouthpieces, they all have a little hole in their mouth. The instrument, the people, have a little hole in their mouth, and the instruments have a little, like a needle coming out the back of them to insert in the mouth. So it was a very realistic type of procedure. It wasn't, that's why the instruments will stay fixed with them. Schoenhut was very, very concerned with trying to get things that could be realistically played with, poses that could be made, and poses that could be held for the playing of them. In addition to the wonderful show wagon, which, by the way, has all of the carousel pieces on the bottom, all of the ancient Roman arenas, scenes that would have been going on with chariot races, just wonderful. This one has a double team of horses, which I have never seen before. And then there is a sideshow wagon with the 3 figures that are on there. I mean, if you just found one of those figures to add to your collection, you'd be so excited. But here is the show wagon with the driver and the 3 different figures, including Foxy Grandpa and the jockey and the little smiling child. They're just wonderful pieces. These are so totally original, every single thing about them, so extremely rare to find and so complete, which is absolutely grand. The circus also includes the animal cage and another animal cage. And there are rare pieces like Roly Dolly with the bulldog. Now I'm going to step out of the way and keep talking, and we're going to just keep looking at a lot of the pieces that are here, and so you can kind of point them out. Let's look at the dolls for a moment, and let's start over on the left-hand side with the little girl in pink. I want you to look at the faces of these dolls, because it may become a long time before you will see another group that has such originality and perfect condition of the dolls in these faces. Better yet, rare models. Absolutely wonderful. Original wigs. 90% of these dolls have their original wigs, which were always tacked on by Schoenhut, and always very easy to identify for that purpose. They all have original Schoenhut shoes with the holes in the bottom of the feet, so they could fix to the metal stands that came with them long before Barbie came along and did the same thing. Schoenhut was doing it with their dolls. and they have this wonderful articulation possibilities, so they can be played with so much. When their catalogs came out, the Schoenhut produced these and called them art dolls. It was a very important concept for him to do. His original dolls were sculpted by a man called Mr. Graziano. Here's a mystery man. Somebody ought to try to find out who in the world this man was. His name exists, but nobody seems to know anything else about him. And if I'm wrong, please correct me, and I would love to know, and I'll pass it on. But it seems he was an Italian sculptor. As far as I can tell, he never immigrated to America. He continued to live in Italy, but he did the original designs for Schoenhut. And even as I'm saying that now, I'm wondering how much connection one might end up finding between an Italian sculptor and the expressive faces on Neapolitan dolls. Interesting to follow that lead up. But at any rate, that's just pure conjecture. Don't pay any attention to that as fact. At any rate, he designed the initial faces, and those faces really, with variation in production, in manufacturing, in technique, kind of continued right along for the next about 12 or 15 years. When you look at Schoenhut, people are constantly trying to break them out into the period in which they were made. But I also want you to think, and this is the first time I really paid attention to that, Schoenhut dolls really only came out in 1911, and for all intents and purposes, the classic Schoenhut dolls, as we're seeing here, were really done by the early 1920s. So that's a short period of production. And to have such a wonderful dolls and such a streamlined production method is great. And techniques were good. Look at the little guy standing in the front. It's holding the clown, which, by the way, is called Coco the Inkwell Clown. And we were talking about the Fleischer Studios before, when we were talking about Oscar Hit Googly with the illustration comic strip that was done. Well, the Fleischer Studios also had a comic illustrated strip called Coco the Inkwell Clown, and that is him, and he was their figure in the illustrated series. Schoenhut produced the clown. Not many were made. They very, very rarely show up. I think we've only had 2 or 3 over the years, so that's a treasure. But the little boy that's holding him is just as much of a treasure because he is about as perfect as you can be. His shoes are slightly different than regular Schoenhut shoes, but they are original. And his suit has the original Marshall Field label inside the suit, which makes it just a gem, showing where he was originally sold. You'll look at the other faces that are up there, so you will see all of the variation of faces, including the 2 models that were considered to be copies, shall we say, of the Cameron Reinhardt 114 and 101 models. They all came out at the same time. Schoenhut also made other toys, and you see over on the left, you'll see a musical, looks like a harp, and it's called the Harpola. That was a toy that was produced by Schoenhut among their other line of wooden toys that they made. And down in the front row, right next to the little kneeling boy, is the wonderful little Roly Dolly. Schoenhut came out with a whole series of what were called Roly Dollies in the early 1900s, and this one with his carved animal bulldog is a very, very special rarity. Toys that were designed to knock them around, but they never tip over. It was natural and didn't really matter because they were made of wood. You could have used that more on a bisque doll. It would have been smarter. And next to them, there's a clown who's performing some kind of it looks like an aerobic exercise, not an acrobatic one. And I could be wrong, but I don't believe that I have seen many black clowns, so I think this is a real treasure. There are, additionally to what you're seeing here, probably about 30 other rare animals that are all in original condition, glass-eyed, original paint, rarities to find. So you want to be sure to look for those if you love the work of the American immigrant from Germany, an immigrant. I stress that because so much of our American doll-making industry is based upon immigrants from Europe that came and built wonderful businesses here in America, and to them we are so grateful and so happy they were able to come. But here is Albert Schoenhut and his great gift of his family to American culture.